Yo no me extiendo más, voy a dar paso a la primera de esas ponencias. Como les decía, será la ponencia ofrecida por ENISA, en este caso corre a cargo del doctor don Marnix Dekker, CISA. Me permiten que lea brevemente y rápidamente su reseña curricular. Experto en seguridad y responsable de seguridad de la información de ENISA. Es una persona de nacionalidad holandesa, licenciado en Ciencias Físicas, doctor en Informática, auditor de Sistemas de Información certificado CISA por ISACA. El doctor Dekker trabaja actualmente en las áreas de servicios, seguros e infraestructuras de información críticas con especial interés en los campos de seguridad en la nube y seguridad en dispositivos móviles. Asimismo, lidera el trabajo de la agencia de ENISA relativo a la puesta en marcha de normativas de seguridad de ámbito europeo para el sector telco, lo cual bueno, pues hoy parece que viene bastante a cuento, ¿no? Dado el marco en el que nos encontramos. Y finalmente, bueno, pues anteriormente ha trabajado en el diseño de protocolos de diversos sistemas para gestión de identidades, así como de servicios de computación en la nube para entidades críticas del sector público. Yo ya, sin más, silenciaré mi micrófono y doy paso ya al ponente. Gracias.
Okay. It's a bit strange to give a presentation online, but I hope to get feedback from them. So first of all, thanks a lot for inviting us to speak. Thanks a lot for supporting the Cybersecurity Month. I think the Cybersecurity Month is becoming really, really important, and it's not only about creating awareness with citizens, but it's also an opportunity for experts like yourself to hold events and to speak about topics and to discuss about where to go in the future. I didn't understand all the Spanish, but I think there was a very nice introduction given to the work of ENISA, to myself, and to some joint ideas that ENISA has, as well as ISACA, about what is the best way forward in cybersecurity. And if I'm not mistaken, you have already discussed the fact that it is very important in security to exchange best practices and to keep discussing about these things and not try to bring security into a small checklist of specific security measures, because as we all know, the field is changing too rapidly to allow us to go to a simple checklist as we might have done in the past. You may have noticed there is a lot of talk in Brussels, in the European Union, about new cybersecurity legislation. A number of countries are making new laws about cybersecurity, and I just wanted to take you back 2 years to the famous DigiNotar incident that happened in the Netherlands. And some people, I guess everyone in the room knows what I mean when I speak about the DigiNotar incident. Basically, a certificate authority was hacked. Certificates were false certificates were created. This was used to make a fairly large man-in-the-middle attack on Iranian citizens. I think it was about 500,000 users that were affected. And the immediate impact was also felt in the Netherlands. The e-government had to shut down, so millions of Dutch citizens couldn't do their transactions online anymore. And it's good to remember also, and I still remember that from my CISA certification, we always try to avoid that people die. That is the highest, the first priority, of course. And unfortunately, what happened in Iran after this attack, there may have been impact on human lives, and that's at least what Mikko Ipponen from F-Secure said after this incident. Now, when the government and the Dutch government was dealing with this DigiNotar incident, they had basically two big problems. They realized. The first one was actually that they didn't really have a legal mandate a law behind them to go to DigiNotar and ask them to do things. The only small reason why they had a legal mandate was because DigiNotar, luckily, was also a provider of qualified electronic signatures. And these providers, they fall under special legislation. And this was basically the reason why the Dutch Ministry of Interior and other bodies could demand information from DigiNotar about the incident. But if DigiNotar had not been a qualified electronic signature provider, then the breach that had to do with website certificates and so on, it would have been hard for the government to even intervene. And so this was a bit of a worry for the Dutch government, that they didn't really have a strong legal basis to deal with these kind of cyber crises. And another big issue was, of course, the fact that DigiNotar was quite late with reporting about the incident and notifying the right authorities. And politicians, again, they were wondering, why is there no law that demands these companies to, when they have a big incident, to at least notify the authorities on this matter. So this set about a whole bunch of discussions in the Netherlands and also in Brussels. Belgium is quite close. And from that moment on, you really see a very strong push in Brussels and in many other member states to make cybersecurity legislation, and specifically to try and get critical providers, critical service providers, to force them legally to take appropriate security measures and to report about the incidents when they happen. And I think it's good to remember this incident because currently the proposed directive on network and information security is being discussed a lot in the European Parliament and in several places. And there are many lobbyists from industry that have doubts and would rather not see a regulatory approach. So I think at that point it's good to just look back at where this comes from and to understand why politicians and governments want more control over cybersecurity issues. And I do not think that implies or means that government is going to dictate what has to be written in a business continuity plan or what has to be done when you hire new employees. But I do think that governments and politicians are generally looking for some better grounds to work on in the field of cybersecurity. I will focus on one very big topic in this legislation that is being set up in the Netherlands, in Germany, and then also in the EU, which is incident reporting. And I'm not sure if I have to convince many people. We think incident reporting is a very important part of supervision by government authorities. And I would just like to split two concepts here. So so usually we speak about incident response and incident reporting. So I'm not going to speak about incident response. So incident response is things that you do immediately after the incident has happened. It's a bit like firefighting. The people that are involved are CISOs, CERTs, internal CERTs, sometimes legal advisors. It's really incident response. What we are going to focus on, and what we are focusing on a lot in ENISA, is what happens after incident response, because we see that the CERTs, they are now working together quite well. They can find each other. They manage to deal with incidents in a coordinated way. But what we think is still missing is that there is a process after the incident has been handled that basically takes stock of what was the full impact of the incident, what was the cause, is this incident, is it going to happen again, is there something we can do about it? Questions that you want to discuss months, weeks or months after the incident, even if the incident is already solved. pizza boxes, by the way, refer to the what the people at CERTS usually eat when when they have a big virus attack and they have to stay up late in the office to deal with the incidents. So incident reporting, it's really about reporting after the fact. It's about the total impact. It's usually when the incident is already completely over. And the goal of incident reporting is not to shame providers or industry or to put out a big sign saying these people have had a breach. But it's much more about sharing experiences about incidents with the rest of the sector, to share experience with other government bodies, and really to also exchange and discuss security measures. And I think you all agree that some of the most useful talks that we go to when we go to ISACA conferences or other security conferences are the talks when someone goes on stage and explains what happened in the case of an incident and what they did and what they didn't do and how they feel afterwards about what they did and what they would do better next time. Of course, one important aspect of incident reporting is also that what you see now a lot is that politicians and they follow the media in terms of cybersecurity because there's no real numbers or statistics about incidents. So what you see very often is that certain very small incidents that only affect a couple of PCs. A good example is Flamer, an espionage virus in the Middle East. It doesn't affect much more than 100 PCs, but it does get a lot of media attention. And what we would like to have is more objective statistics about what are the big incidents, what is creating the most impact, and to use this data to make policy and improve a situation where needed. I'm going to give you a very brief, I'm going to try to be very brief about this, but I'm going to give you one example of incident reporting legislation, or actually security legislation in the telecom sector. And the reason I give you this example is because this specific legal text has been used as the basis for the NIS directive, the Network and Information Security Directive that is currently being debated between the member states. So the legal text is quite boring, but it basically asks the providers, it actually asks the countries to supervise that providers take appropriate security measures, appropriate to the risk, and when something does go wrong, they have to notify the authority. And in this case, it is only for significant incidents, so incidents with a big impact. And then the authorities also share this information about incidents with ENISA and the European Commission. And there is this process that we call annual reporting, where at the end of the year we look at all the incidents and we aggregate them to see what are big root causes, what are big trends or common issues. So you can make a drawing of the legal text, and you see a number of information flows in this legal article. And basically, the picture speaks for itself. But there's an incident at a network or service provider. This has to be reported to the national authorities. Sometimes the public has to be informed as well. The national authority also informs the authorities abroad and the ENISA, and then together with other authorities, there's a discussion about what can be done to prevent these incidents. And a similar discussion is also being done at a national level. If you look at the structure of this legal text, you see a triangle. Basically, it asks providers to assess the risks, and then to take appropriate security measures, and then if something does go wrong, to report about incidents. And this incident reporting, of course, can be used then again for a better risk assessment. This triangle you see it in a number of security laws, and it is now what is now happening is that the European Union and is asking member states to start supervising this triangle. And in the telecom package, this is already happening. So very quickly, we set up a group of experts from different national authorities on telecommunications. Also, Spain is involved, and all the other EU countries. And basically, what we discuss is a lot about incidents, and we discuss a lot about how to supervise security, because we all know that implementing security is difficult. It's always changing. Technology is changing. In the past, it was easy. You install an antivirus system, you have a firewall, and then you're done. Nowadays, that is not enough. Antivirus systems are not working anymore. Firewalls are becoming useless because everything goes over the same ports now. And you see that people have to be creative and proactive and trying to improve security. So doing security well is difficult. Supervising security is even more difficult because you're not seeing the technical details, but you have to somehow hope or see that things go well. And so there are a lot of talk in this forum is about how to supervise an entire sector of telecom providers. And if you want to look, for example, at cloud computing, there's people speaking about we should supervise security in the cloud computing sector. Then you have a similar problem. There are some very big cloud computing providers that can teach all of us, ENISA included, so many things about security that we never knew about. But there are also many small providers that still need to have the experience and still need to build up expertise. The kind of things that we have developed with this group is things like, what are thresholds for reporting across borders? So when are incidents big enough to share with colleagues in other countries? Because we don't want to. We would rather speak about 50 big incidents than 500 small ones. We have set up a tool where people where the authorities can submit their reports and basically use that as a platform for discussing about specific items. Here I show you the page of a fake country. This was part of a pilot. This is the page that national authorities see when they work with this tool. Important, I'm taking you now over the form, the incident reporting form. So we focus very much on the causes. So this is, as I said, this work is much more about what do you do after the fact. So what we're really interested in is what is actually causing this incident. So a lot of this work, a lot of the reporting form is actually about detailed causes and how they relate. And in fact, what I said, the problem we're trying to solve here is basically the following that you see in this picture, where you have some governing body and they impose certain security requirements on a sector. The sector is composed of multiple providers, and then the question is, how does this governing body supervise security? And just imposing a single standard like ISO or maybe COBIT, or that is not going to work. So we have to be more flexible, but at the same time we have to understand as well that the government authority needs some evidence, some proof that things are going well. Otherwise they get very nervous. One thing that we have developed for this particular work was very much related to COBIT, by the way, which is a maturity model for security measures. So this is not so much about how to do security. This is much more about how to supervise security. So what we made here actually, and I'm sure you can see the slide, is a typical information security management framework with different domains and high-level security objectives. But below these security objectives, we have a kind of a questionnaire, a kind of self-assessment form. So where the supervisor can send this around to providers and say, where are you with security? What kind of security policy do you have? Do you have all the processes around it or not? And this allows the supervisor to understand better which organizations are mature, which organizations are not mature. So it's very important to stress here that we're not trying to set a baseline or a minimum set of security measures. We're only saying, look, you have to assess the risks, you have to decide what is appropriate in terms of security measures, and here is a list of security measures you could think about. And you know, we believe that you don't always need a Ferrari to go shopping. And this is the same idea applies to security measures. This kind of maturity models, and I'm sure you're aware of this also with COVID, this allows you to make profiles across the board for different providers. And this allows you to better work with a situation where you're dealing with small providers, big providers in the same sector, in the same area. Of course, our standard is mapped to international standards. In this case, we're showing a mapping to ISO. One important aspect, of course, of this article is that we have incident reporting. So we receive reports from member states. Some pie charts. So here what we get are major outages. So we're focusing only on outages at the moment. And as you may know, outages are very easy. Security breaches are, you know, often much more complicated. Outages are difficult to hide anyway, so it's a kind of a pilot. And we're looking at now how to extend this to other types of incident, and that is hard. I will skip over this because this is not very relevant. But of course, you know, this picture might detail it clearly. I mean, once you have collected incident reports from all European countries, then you can start to speak about things like software bugs or power cuts without pointing fingers to a specific country. So we can speak about the fact that there are many people stealing copper cables without pointing a finger at maybe Spain or Italy. And that is very helpful, this kind of anonymization that you get through working together and collaborating. And I'm sure Joris maybe knows that there's an interesting scheme, voluntary incident reporting scheme set up in the Netherlands in the banking sector, where they voluntarily report about incidents, but they aggregate all the incidents together. And there's kind of a self-regulated mechanism that has been set up there based around incident reporting. So what we think is that this incident reporting is really the basis for addressing issues in cybersecurity, and there's a couple of topics that we are now addressing, things like national roaming in case of big crisis. So is it possible to use the network of another mobile operator if there is a big outage, and how would you set this up? These are interesting topics, and they come really from the incident reporting. I alluded to this before. There are more security articles in the EU legislation, and a lot of them have this similar flow. I will skip this slide because there's too much information in it. But you know, I will just take you quickly over Article 4 of the e-privacy directive, for example. It speaks about personal data. It's a very specific topic, but it defines personal data breach as a security breach with impact on personal data. So another type of security breach. And what we think is that it would be good to have a single security framework, a single way to report about security breaches, and not to have a different scheme when it's a security breach with a large impact in society, or when it's a security breach with impact on personal data, and so on. So we're trying to work with the countries to make these two articles, Article 4 of the e-privacy directive and Article 13a, to come together and to have the same scheme, so that the providers in that sector can work with one common approach. I will skip all this. Well, this may be interesting for you. You know, there must be a lot of consultants in the room as well. You might know that in the EU, e-privacy, the privacy in the telecommunications is split. It's kind of a joint responsibility between telecom regulators and data protection authorities. And you may know also that they have quite a different approach to things. The data protection authority much more come from a fundamental human rights angle. Telecom regulators, they come from much more a competition market angle, and that's interesting to see the clash, basically. Very briefly about the Cybersecurity Directive. So this has been being hotly debated at the moment in Brussels, and there are many lobbyists from industry that argue that this is badly written, and for sure it could have been written up better. But at the same time, nothing is ever perfect, and there's a lot of good stuff in this directive, and we all hope that large parts of it will be approved by Parliament. Important for you to know is that an important part of this directive is actually based on Article 13A of the Telecom package. So you see this triangle again, and this triangle will now be used to regulate cybersecurity in critical sectors like transport, healthcare, finance. Okay, the Article 14 of the Cybersecurity Directive is similar to Article 13A. I will not bore you with this. One of the more controversial topics, of course, is what is in scope. And on the one hand, it's quite clear that critical infrastructure that uses IT systems, they should be in scope. But there's also some mentioning about a wider scope that involves things like cloud computing. And that is difficult to define, and this is also being discussed a lot. People say that this is much too wide. Social networks, search engines, app stores. They say that that is not very clear as an example. Just to give you an example, I don't know if you remember the BlackBerry incident that happened in London some years ago. The big outage, and I think 70 million users in the EU had problems with their email. A lot of people in the finance sector, traders and so on, couldn't do business anymore. BlackBerry is not a telecom provider, so they were not under the telecom legislation. Everyone had the feeling that there should be somehow a law that covered these kind of services. But if you would have done all the legal work and all the discussions with lawyers and so on to get this through, by now you would have noticed that BlackBerry is almost gone as a player in the market. So this also shows how fluid the IT field is and how hard it is to capture critical services in this sector. And I think that will be a problem for years to come, for everyone, for professionals and for government and for industry. I'm going to switch through a little bit. Yeah, so I would like to just finish with some points about incident reporting, really. I think the topics about security measures have been discussed already, have been introduced already. We all agree that security measures are not a fixed list of things to do, and they should not be mandatory. It should be much more an exchange of best practices between experts in the industry, facilitated by the government. But incident reporting is quite another topic, and voluntary incident reporting is not happening. There are no or hardly any voluntary incident reporting schemes in the world, and so in many countries the idea is to make it mandatory. And the question is, of course, how do you make incident reporting mandatory? We all know that system administrators, they can be looking at their machines for hours or for weeks or for months and not know that they have been breached. Some big hacks, they have been going on for months and no one noticed anything. So how do you deal with this? How do you create enough incentives for people to keep looking for incidents? Because I think what we see now, there's a new philosophy, basically. Assume that you are breached, and just keep looking for where you're breached or what you're breached. And that is very important to keep in mind when you hear discussions from, for example, people that are not in the security field. They speak about reporting as a kind of a penalty, as a kind of a punishment. We make companies report, and in this way, they will stop making incidents. And sometimes they say, we have to give heavy fines for every incident and a lot of bureaucracy, and then they will stop making these security incidents. But I think, as a lot of experts know, that these companies that have security breaches are often also victims of problems that are much wider than their own shop. So they involve software bugs, vulnerabilities in HTTPS, and so on. So what is really the question I would like to perhaps you to think about is how do we increase transparency about incidents and vulnerabilities, and how can we incentivize that there is more so how can we make it attractive for someone to go to his boss and say, boss, the server with all the credit card details that we have of our customers, this very important server, I didn't patch it for the last 3 months because some of the processes got stuck. I mean, how do we create an environment where this kind of openness and transparency is possible? And maybe we should think about things like anonymity and immunity for reporters. Maybe we should think about fines for not reporting. We should look at corporate culture. We should also look at the relationship between government and the industry, so that the industry is not afraid to report about incidents, so that it's clear that there's no legal side to reporting. And of course, how do you make it more attractive? Also to give something back to the industry. So, let's speak about how can we share information about incidents so that it is useful for industry to take part in these incident sharing schemes, basically. Another point, of course, that I already touched upon. How do we deal with the ever-changing technology in the information in the IT sector? I mean, what is reasonable to regulate and what not? We don't want to regulate the Facebook games, but Twitter is becoming quite critical. In Holland, the minister said, just like sending letters or when sending fax, if you send a message using social media, users have the same expectation of secrecy of correspondence. So there's an interesting discussion, I think, there about how do we continue to create a secure infrastructure without touching too much the services that run on top of it. And then finally, a topic that we are struggling really with is a national IT risk assessment, how to help countries to continuously assess risks related to IT infrastructure in their countries, and also how to better understand where to focus their attention. I'm afraid I went a bit over time, although I started a bit later. I would like to maybe take some questions from the floor, or otherwise, if there's no time, then I would just like to thank you for this opportunity to speak at your event.
¿Alguna pregunta?
Hello, my name is Adolfo. Thanks for your speaking. I will have one question. I think the architecture you have proposed, or a European directive proposed to manage management of the European security, is very government focused. A lot of government focused. Don't you think that this over control of the governments is a risk by itself? Thanks.
I think we are in different jobs, and I completely understand your point. So my job is a lot to work with governments and to advise them about how to deal with cybersecurity. And I think a lot of people in the information security field, they have the job to help organizations to deal with information security, and that's a very different job. So I think this is also why it seems to you that this talk is very much focused on government. But I think if I go to a talk maybe of yourself or of many people in the room here in the conference, they will focus on what their customer is and speak about enterprise management and speak about the role of the CISO in dealing with incidents. But to your point, I completely agree, and I think I will have to make that more clear. Is what we really want to avoid is that the governments start to sit on the chair of the information security officer in the company. We really think that the risk assessment and the choice what security measures to take is really in the hands of the organization, and that in fact information security is largely the responsibility of the company. So in that sense, I think you're completely right.
Hello, I'm the president of the Spanish Business Continuity Institute. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. First is what will be the time schedule for some kind of alignment between the Critical Infrastructure Protection Directive and this directive, because the review of the first two sectors, energy and transport, was not very happy. So what's the plan to introduce the IT sector within the sectors covered by the directive? And the second one is the recent announcement of Deutsche Telekom that want to restrict in some way the internet flow within Germany. This risk are nationalization the policy of telecommunication in Europe?
Sorry, could you repeat your second question?
Yes, the second question. The second question is that it seems that the risk recently disclosed about the PRINCE system and things like that seems to have raised a reaction from national operators of telecommunication, like Deutsche Telekom announcement recently, in the sense that they want to put some kind of restrictions of the internet flow. I would like to know if this is going to be a risk of increasing lack of trust between operators in Europe.
Okay, so about your first question, will the IT sector be integrated? So I think that's really a fundamental question. I'm not sure if the IT sector exists. I do know that there are a lot of people that read the NIS directive. They were surprised that software development companies were not mentioned. And I think we can all agree that the software is usually is one of the main causes of cybersecurity incidents. So it's a bit strange, yes, that maybe that part is out of scope. On the other hand, there is part of the IT sector, the telecom sector, is already under regulation. So I expect.
Sorry, maybe I put some question that is not exactly what you understood. What I mean is that the European Directive of Critical Infrastructure Protection was initially addressing 12 sectors, but at the end they agreed to approve cover only energy and transport, and the plan was, after review in 2012, the information and telecommunication sector will be included as one of the sectors covered by Directive of Critical Infrastructure Protection. My question is, what is the plan to articulate the legal relationship between these two directives, if any?
Yeah, well, so the background of the NIS directive is the CIIP action plan, which and the response to it, which are two communications. There is no other directive in store. So if you're looking for the upcoming directive on CIIP, then that is the NIS directive, and the scope is in fact a bit larger. So there is also finance. There's not only energy and transport. I hope that sort of explains your question. And the second point that you're raising, I don't know if that is the reason that Deutsche Telekom is making these steps is because of EU legislation. I guess, but I'm not completely sure about the news that you're mentioning, is that there have been a couple of denial of service attacks with quite big impact, and a couple of countries are now looking into the possibility of dealing with these attacks by temporarily cutting off flows from abroad. But I'm not sure about I don't think Germany will isolate itself from the rest of the world for fear of being exposing their secrets or sensitive information about incidents.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dekker. Let's continue with the next. Continuaremos con la siguiente ponencia.